want to know, what was your earliest memory when it comes to music? What was that musical bug that bit you like, damn it, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life?
Yeah, that's a really easy answer because I think when I was 7 or 8 years old, I was in music class. This was back when they actually had music class in grade school. Um, but my the music teacher played Rhapsody in Blue,
Hmm.
and uh, I went home and I told my father. I said I heard this incredible piece. I don't know what I said to him, but I words to the effect of, I heard this incredible piece of music today. Have you ever heard of a piece of music called Rhapsody in Blue by a guy named George Gershwin? And my father said, yeah, we have that record. And so I took that record up to my bedroom and I got out my little all-in-one, record player, my Burl Ives home record player, whatever it was at that point, and I spun that record day after day after day after day. I wore out both sides of it, and like a lot of the Rhapsody in Blue recordings, it was American in Paris on one side and Rhapsody in Blue on the other. And so that was it for me. It just completely blew me away. And I think that the music that gets us when we're young, and I think there's a period there, maybe the first 20, 25 years of your life, you're really wide open to getting imprinted with all kinds of things, art, visual things, smells, you name it. But music particularly is really seductive during that era, and so that was it for me. And uh, from there, it was like what my father had in the stereo cabinet,
Yeah.
the other records that he had that we listened to, and then it was pretty much done when that was all over. I was addicted.
It's funny you say that because when I was younger, right, I don't know if it was just you have this preconceived notion of, my friends like this, so I have to like this. And then my friends don't like this, so I can't like that. And what I mean by that is when I was growing up, 90s hip hop was my jam. 90s hip hop and 90s R&B. I loved it's gonna make me sound stupid, I guess, but and I have you're the first musician I've actually had on as far as this podcast goes. Mainly it's voice actors and screenwriters. But like I said at the beginning, this music was so influential. I loved the vibe that was given off when Hey Arnold would come on. He had the coolest, like I said, the coolest room, and he listened to the coolest music, or everything had you were just happy when you listen to this, right? Now, going back to when I was influenced by music as far as a little kid, it was that 90s hip hop and R&B. And I always had this mindset that if you like that, you couldn't like other genres like heavy metal or classic rock or insert genre here. And it wasn't until I hit, 22, 23, and then I'm on an aircraft carrier out in the middle of the Gulf, right? I'm sitting here with a whole bunch of different people, and then everybody is just playing these different music, and everybody is liking what everybody else is playing. And it was going from R&B to country to rap to metal to this to that, insert whatever genre. And then I started looking, and everybody's just tapping their feet, and I'm like, it's okay to like all these different genres. I thought once you pick, it's like picking a sports team, right? You're like, I'm going to just stick with this one, right? Because this one's working out for me. And when I found out that you could like jazz and you could like country and you could like hip hop and you can like this, it wasn't until I was 23, 24, 25 where I just, like I said, left all those preconceived notions. When you were just going through your dad's cassettes and his albums and all of this other stuff, right? His big tables and his big storage containers for all of his music. I mean, what were some of the, I guess, gems that you would pull out, or what do you think a gem is now when you think about all that music you were listening to?
Well, he was uh, he was a big Oscar Peterson fan.
Hmm.
For people on the podcast in the audience that don't know, Oscar Peterson was a pianist, um, really really great pianist who did a bunch of great, really fantastic trio recordings. Um, so that's one thing. Fortunately, I was able to see Oscar Peterson play before he passed a couple of times, and that that was awesome. It really felt like going home. Another thing was Broadway musicals. I mean, my mother was a musical fan, so we had the album that sticks in my head is My Fair Lady. I know the whole score to My Fair Lady backwards and forwards. You know, I could sing you. I could still do a bunch of the patter songs from that. So I was also a big Broadway musical fan. What else? There was a great guitar player named Howard Roberts, jazz guitar player. Listen to his stuff. Trying to think of what else. I mean, those are the ones that come immediately to mind.
Now, you brought up a jazz guitar player, and I don't know if this is going to be super, super deep cuts. And usually when I have questions, I try to save them for the end. However, you brought up a jazz guitarist, and one of those questions was about a jazz musician. Now, this is from AC, and this comes from Reddit. And then I'm not sure if it's a he or she, so sorry in advance, you didn't tell me. But they're like, Jim, did you compose Groove Remote Lockjaw with Eddie Lockjaw Davis, the famous jazz saxophonist, in mind? Did that come across your mind?
No, actually, it didn't. Lockjaw was the name of the character, as your listener probably knows. It was a tortoise, a giant tortoise that Arnold rescues. You know, so that's where the Lockjaw part of it comes from. And Groove Remote actually was one of the pieces. There are a couple of pieces of music in the show that were things that I had written before I did the show. And Groove Remote was something, it was a head that I wrote called Confession. And that was around for, maybe a year or so before we actually started doing the show. But one thing that happened when we were developing Hey Arnold, Craig and I, Craig Bartlett, the creator of the show, and I had obviously a lot of conversations about what we wanted to do with the music. And then before the animation even started being made, I went off and just did a bunch of writing, kind of thinking, well, okay, based on what we talked about, these are some ideas that might make it into the show. And Groove Remote, there's a couple of different versions. The version that is called Lockjaw is the more melodic version, and then there's a kind of a funkier version that's got some samples in it, and that is I don't even know if that exact one ever made it into the show, but that's something that shows up online a lot. And it's also something that I've done recently. I did a new version of that's up on my SoundCloud, so people can search that out as well.
Where can they find it?
Also called Groove Remote. It's called Groove Remote, and then parentheses Confession. And
what's the name of your SoundCloud profile so they can find it? Is it just Jim Lang?
It's the Jimmy Lang.
Yeah. Okay.
So TheJimmyLang.
Make sure you go and hook this man up, man. Buy everything he's putting out there, because nothing, like I said, nothing brings you back more to a specific time in your life than a couple things, right? Music being one of them. You can sit there and say, shit, I remember the first time I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. I can remember the first time I hear Bad Fish from Sublime. And all these guys are just my guys. These are my bands that I just absolutely loved growing up. Or the first time I heard Dolly Parton, right? So it just depends on what I'm feeling like. It's like, man, Grandpa was onto some shit with Merle Haggard, man. I love this guy because of my grandpa, right? So nothing really brings you back quicker than a sound or a smell from a specific food, or it's just weird what kind of emotions or what kind of thoughts that these words or these melodies or these smells kind of elicit in your brain. Now you brought up Craig the creator, man. I mean, this dude, not only did he get me with Hey Arnold, right? I've got a little kid, and then I got another one on the way here in July. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to be just as hooked as my oldest son was on Dinosaur Train. But how did that relationship with Craig form? Did you know him beforehand, or is it something that they reached out to you and like, I love your style, I'd like to implement it into my show?
We had worked together on a few things before Hey Arnolds. There was a company in Burbank called Imagination Arts, Bob Rogers Imagination Arts, and they do museums, like World's Fair, World's Fair Pavilion, stuff like that. Sorry, I'm blanking on there's a name in the trade for it.
Oh,
But anyway, we worked on we met on this crazy thing that we were doing for Toshiba. It was a pavilion for Toshiba that was in Expo 90, I think, and it was industrial robots, Toshiba industrial robots, and the story was that there were 3 student robots and a teacher robot, and the students were misbehaving all the time, and the teacher had to keep them in line. And when you think about industrial robots, these are things that it kind of looks like, there's an upright thing and then an arm that comes off of that and then a clamp on the end of it. And what these robots were designed to do was to work in the assembly of circuit boards. So they were really clever at picking up a circuit board, flipping it over, inserting it in something, and then pulling it back out and flipping it over and then moving it on to the next thing. They were really great at that. What Craig had to do was sit in a warehouse in Osaka with a bunch of Japanese engineers, none of whom spoke English, and of course Craig didn't speak any Japanese, and teach these robots how to do the funky chickens. So at some point they were getting started, and the guy that was doing the music for it wasn't really getting it, and I had done another project for them just prior to that, and they said, would you be interested in meeting this guy Craig Bartlett and talking to him about this Toshiba thing? And I said, sure. And he's a great guy. He's really funny and super engaging, and we just hit it off immediately. So we did that project. We did a couple of other projects for that company, and then at that point he was pitching Hey Arnold to Nickelodeon, and he said, would you be into doing music for this cartoon? I said, yeah, absolutely, I would. So and fortunately the show got picked up. We did the pilot, and then they picked it up, and then the rest is history. We did 100 episodes. So
now, what do you remember what year? You might have said it earlier, and I'm just blanking, but you remember what year like they approached you for Hey Arnold?
Honestly, no. I think it was 92. Can that be right?
It's probably right, because the only reason I ask is because, like I said, you're the first musician I've ever had on here, and I want to see how the sausage is made with you when it comes to music and all that stuff. So, when I talk to writers and artists, and voice actors, the writers would have as far as like, hey, this is point A, point B, point C. They need to get here, fill in the blanks type of things. So the voice actors would have these things after they've already been animated, or they're making the sounds with their mouths before, and then the animators would go and match them up. And I was baffled when I heard that, some of this stuff, especially back in the early 90s, was almost 2 years out from the time they wrote it to the time that it actually got onto the screen, was almost a 2-year process. Now, for you, at what point do they come to you? Obviously, they're like, hey, we're going to do this show. Would you like to do the music? Is the show at that point already done and animated, and then you're watching it and you're like, this is what I'm feeling for this scene, or this is what I'm feeling for this dialogue? Or how does that mindset work for you?
Well, there's 2 parts to the gig. If you're doing something that has songs, because the dialogue is the first thing that, after the script is written, the dialogue is the first thing that happens. The dialogue all gets recorded, and then everything sort of flows from that.
Yeah.
So if you're using any songs in the show, those songs have to be written up front and then recorded with the voice talent so they can be animated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that happens, and then everything goes away. And depending on the production and the style of animation, whether it's traditional, 2D animation or computer animation or whatever, there's a length of time that happens while the storyboards get done, the animation all gets built, and then it comes back, and the actual underscore gets composed at the very end of the process, like with most films, or TV shows. That's kind of like the music and the sound effects are the last things that happen before it gets mixed and shipped off and put on the air.
So with that being in mind, how long would it take you once you start seeing how the show's playing out and how the characters are kind of forming, and you got to make all these melodies and everything to kind of transition between scenes? it's just got to match. It's got to be a marriage made in heaven, right? So I mean, at what point and how long does it really take you to say, hey, this is the vibe I want? Or was Craig saying, hey, I've got this really, you know, unique way I want to do jazz inspired and I want it influenced this way? Or was that 100% you? Just like, this is what I want to do, this is good? Or was it a 50-50 kind of thing?
We talked about, as I said, we had a lot of conversations before we started making the pilot,
Mhm.
about what we wanted the music to feel like, and we both were in accord about just about everything we talked about. I mean, we really didn't have to scuffle about anything, and the things that we really had in common were, one, we had both been listening to a DJ on KCRW, Jason Bentley, in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
and he was playing acid jazz at that point, and it just seemed like, wow, this is a really great. It's a mashup of the cool old, you know, soul jazz stuff that was getting made in the '60s and '70s, and some modern beats, you know. So that seemed like a really great sort of urban flavor that we could use. And then the other thing that we really agreed on was we both loved Vince Guaraldi and the music that he wrote for Peanuts.
Mhm.
It was jazz inflected. Obviously, he was a jazz musician, and it was also extremely emotional and melodic, which we felt. We didn't even really know, I think, when we first started making the show, how important that emotional aspect of it was going to be, because I think we got further into Arnold's, you know, interior life and the interior life of all these characters as the show went on, and people, you know, people really responded to that, and the writers, of course, loved the idea. You know, we're not just making gags all the time. We can write some real stories about the kind of shit that actually happens to kids,
Yeah.
you know, and grown-ups, you know. So I think, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that's one of the things that really resonated. You know, when I hear from people these days, that's one of the things that really resonated with people. It's just like, this felt like me. This felt like,
Yeah.
you know, my confusing life being a kid. You know, really wonderful sometimes, really crazy sometimes. Adults, what's up with adults? You
Yeah.
know. So anyway.
It definitely, you can always tell when people are just phoning it in, when people are just doing it for money, right? And I've heard it and I've said it a couple different times, man. You can tell when people are doing it for passion, and you can tell when people are doing it for profit, right? And one thing that I really enjoyed and I really appreciated when I was watching cartoons as a kid, because it's pretty much all I watched as a kid was just cartoons. And it's pretty much all I watch now is essentially cartoons. I'm either watching Cobra Kai with my kid because he's a little karate master, and that's all he wants to watch is just Karate Kid this, Johnny Lawrence that, you know, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm just tired of the sneak attack kicks and punches when I come down the stairs. Those tend to add up a little while, you know, after a little while. But like I said, what I really appreciated about this show was every character, right, was somebody you could see in the neighborhood when you were out, right? You would just see a Gerald, you would see a Harold, you would see a Helga. Everybody had a brain, you know, you insert character. There was a Eugene in every single circle, right? I mean, I was usually not the Eugene as far as like I got tripped and I was clumsy, but I was pretty much the only redheaded kid running around, right? So um, I always fancied myself as an Arnold, but as I got older, I'm like, you know what? I could be somebody's Gerald. And here's one thing I was saving for one day when I get Craig on here. I was saving this because I don't know if he really did this, but Gerald wore the number 33, right? And I don't know if that was a nod, and I don't want to Google it because I want to feel like it was my thought when I thought about it, because I was super duper baked. I was smoking a joint the other day and I was like, you know what? I have no problem being somebody's Scottie Pippen. I'm like, holy shit, Gerald was Arnold's Scottie Pippen. He wore the number 33. So I have no idea if those two correlations match up. This is high math at this point, right? So I don't think it really counts. But, right, you know, getting to all of that other stuff, what I loved about this, other than the characters that you could pick out in your neighborhood or in your friend circle, the show didn't talk down to you. It taught you that everybody's got a crush that is unattainable. Everybody has that bully that is a soft-hearted guy like Harold was, right? Everybody's got that older brother like Jamie, right? Or older sister, right? So it was so far ahead of its time, right? And the fact that this show, I mean, this show has lasted the test of time. I think this show will go down as probably the best cartoon Nick ever did, right? You know, if it was not for, like, if Hey Arnold was on Cartoon Network, I'd be so pressed to pick my favorite cartoon, because it really comes down to Ed, Edd and Eddy on Cartoon Network and then Hey Arnold on Nickelodeon. I mean, Cartoon Network was sweeping Nickelodeon for me until Hey Arnold came on the scene. And I didn't even really see Hey Arnold in '96 when it came out. I was more of a 2000s, because we were jumping from place to place when we were growing up. We were moving from a bad place to a better place to a really good place when I was younger. So I caught most of this stuff in reruns. But like I said, the fact that it was done and you didn't get talked down to, and then when you watch it as an adult, you see like, oh man, this is a lot deeper than just a kid's show. They're talking about real stuff that not only affected the kids, like you said, but you could see it affecting adults and teenagers and all this other stuff as well. I mean, it just goes to show you like how fucking smart Craig is and how brilliant this man is when it came to writing this show. With that being said, did you watch any of this? I mean, obviously you watched it when you were doing, you know, as far as your job, but I mean, would you sit down with your kids and watch this show, or was that something you're just like, it's work?
My kids, when they were little, we didn't do any TV outside of, you know, Sesame Street and stuff like that, you know, the
Yeah,
PBS kids shows, but other TV just like didn't happen in our household. You know,
yeah,
my wife and I were big TV people, and so their special treat was we had we had a yoga class that met in our living room,
hmm,
and the yoga class met on the night that Hey Arnold was on.
yeah.
So when Hey Arnold was on, they got to go hang out in front of the TV and watch Hey Arnold. But I was doing yoga, so I never got to see the show when it actually aired.
You're just
So
downward dog posing the entire time while Arnold and Jared are
exactly.
getting chased by Harold.
Chilling, you know, chilling with the downward dog.
All right, just breathe in, Jim. Exhale,
Yeah.
feel it with your feet. I've done a few yoga classes here and there. It's fantastic. I should do it more often because, you know, my back feels so much better when I am stretching, when I'm doing these type of things. But getting back and staying on track to an extent here, what is your process as far as like, I see this going on and I'm going to start making stuff? Do you see like a plot, or do you see something, or are you just walking through your house and you hear something fall and like, man, I got the base layer for something, or a foundation for something here?
Well, on Hey Arnold, and on most of the cartoon stuff that I've done, I like to I like to work from the beginning of the story straight through to the end of the story.
Mhm.
Um, so I would start most of the time. I would start by writing the open for the show. You know,
Yeah.
so generally there's a kind of an introductory shot. You know, like a long shot where you're seeing PS 118, or you're seeing, you know, Arnold's house, or you're seeing something like that. And so we'd quote one of the themes from the show, and then, you know, you sort of roll on from there. Um, by the time the show was one season old, we really had, even before we finished the first season, we really had almost all of the major character themes in place.
Mhm.
Um, so a lot of the writing is figuring out how to take one of the character themes and play it under a scene, maybe in a way that people hadn't heard before. You know, do a different arrangement of it. So that's a big part of the process, is just figuring out, you know, what thematic stuff you're going to use. And then the other thing is, really, for cartoons are really very closely tied to what's going on the screen. You know,
Mhm.
there's a very close relationship between the image and the music. The music is always kind of supporting what's going on, particularly, you know, in the comedic moments. You know, you're hitting things that are happening on screen.
Yeah.
So a lot of the creative process really starts from there. It's like, you know, how fast is the scene going? You know,
Yeah.
is it a walk and talk? Or are they just kind of, are they depressed? Are they walking slowly down the street? Or are they happy? You know, they got their baseball gloves and bats and stuff, and they're going to go play ball. That's a whole different kind of feeling. So what's that groove feel like? If it was Helga, it was always, you know, she was either pissed at Arnold or she was in love with Arnold. So it was like the sad, violin, or the Wagnerian orchestra, that was playing her incredibly passionate, rants that she would
Yeah.
give about Arnold. So, yeah, I think that's it. There was a point I remember maybe in the third or fourth season, when I felt like I kept seeing myself coming around the corner. Like we had done the same things a lot of times, and I just thought to myself, I have to bust out and do some. I have to come up with some different ideas. I have to do some more thematic thinking, or change up what the instrumentation is that I've been using, or whatever. And so there was a point there where I kind of changed a few things up. I don't know that I could even tell you where it happened, and I definitely don't think you'd really notice it if you listen to the score. But I just remember at a certain point thinking, okay, I've done that particular thing enough times now. I'm going to have to do something else. I have to refresh it a little bit. And it's the joy, really, of getting to do a whole bunch of episodes of something. I've never done another show where we did 100 episodes. So that's a long run if you count the run up time doing the pilot and doing the making the early shows before the animation starts coming back. It was about 6 years.
That's
So
that's insane. Not only
6+ years, really more like 6.5 or 7, really.
to understand that you guys got 100 episodes and then you did 2 movies, and I'm pretty sure we can talk about it because it's been 3 years at this point. I mean, that movie, I did not understand or think that I was going to be hit as hard as I was hit when I saw the Jungle movie. When Arnold finds his parents finally at the end of all this, and you finally find out his last name, and then you're pissed because Grandpa's been saying it the entire damn show. You're like, God, like, damn it, Craig, man, why are you so much smarter than everybody else, right? It's just, it was one of those things. But that seemed like, I'm gonna try to do it without like tearing up some, a little diva moment here. But no, that scene, like I said, when he finds his parents and he finally gets that closure, if you will, right? Because you feel for this kid all the time. I had a friend growing up, and he lost his dad at a young age. He had a brain aneurysm, as I have a stroke there, brain aneurysm, and he died real young, 5th grade, 4th grade, somewhere around there. I can't remember the year
That's rough.
or the grade. Yeah. So you see that loss, right, in your friend. And then you're consistently seeing it. Like, this dude is just longing for his parents. And then to have to wait, what was it, 13 years after the show ended, you get the Jungle movie, which I'm so thankful it finally got made. If there was any show that deserved a bow, a swan song, a standing ovation, it was this show. This show was just so beautiful. This beautiful movie was beautiful. But just see, like I said, the Shortman thing coming around, and then he finds his parents, and then it was just so beautifully shot. When you guys were doing this, was this in a culmination? I don't want to even say that word because that's not the right terminology. When this movie finished, what did you feel from your standpoint as being the composer that did this from day one to the time it got finished? What were you feeling at the end of this movie?
Well, I'm going to give you a kind of a banal answer, to your question. I was dog tired. We had a release date for the movie, and this happens all the time, making TV and making movies. That because the music and the sound effects, as I said, are at the very end of the train. You're the last one to pull into the station always, and if anything else happens in the production, and the production kind of slides back, what typically doesn't slide back is the day that you're supposed to deliver the thing. So, long story short, some of the animation came in more slowly than they expected it was going to happen. There were some things that Craig and Raimi, who is the other animation director on the show, or one of the two animation directors on the movie, things that they decided they needed to reshoot or needed to reanimate. So there were bits and pieces of the movie that were really late coming in. So I was down in Nashville recording the orchestra what, 4 or 5 days before I was supposed to deliver the movie.
How many?
So
You said 4?
4 or 5 days, yeah, before I was supposed to deliver. So
That's insane.
yeah, well, it's, it's as a my first agent said, it gets really hot in the kitchen. Are you ready for that? So
I love
it
I
was
love
very
the kitchen reference.
it was very hot in the kitchen. You know, I, but I will say the moments, the things that are really memorable to me, and you talked about the scene where Arnold sees his parents.
Mhm.
Um, for me, having lived with the characters and lived with the show, lived inside the show for all those years, um, there was a part of me that was absolutely terrified to try and score
Yeah.
that moment because, hey, it's the thing that everybody's been waiting for. It's like when Helga kisses Arnold.
Yeah.
That happened a long time ago, but that was another one. It's like, oh my word, what am I supposed? How am I supposed to do this? So leading up to the moment when the day that I actually sat down to write that cue,
Mhm.
uh, I was, I was a little flipped out. I thought this is not going to be easy. As it turns out, um, writing is one of those things. It's like the deal is you just have to open yourself up.
Yeah.
You know, the music is all out there in the universe. The universe is full of beautiful music.
Mhm.
People are full of beautiful music. The world is full of beautiful music. All you have to do is just shut up and get out of the way. And so that's what happened. I mean, that scene developed very organically, and I had a couple of ideas. I had a place to start from that I was a really nice discovery.
Mhm.
And then the building of it, the building and building and building as he's running to get to the place uh, where his parents are. That was all really happened really organically. And then, as we often did in the show, the climax of the whole thing is like a very quiet moment because it's not triumphant so much as it is uh, grace descending on him
Yeah.
finally, after all these years of wondering what happened to his parents. So anyway, that was kind of like the biggest moment for me.
Now,
uh,
when you said those 2 moments, and was the Helga kiss, that happened earlier, and then, of course, when he found his parents. Um, what was your initial thought as far as, like, this is the sound? Did you have to wait until you saw it? Or do you already have, like you said, you just gotta shut up and listen to the music that's already out there? You gotta sit here and just take it all in? Or was this something that you have to visually see? Or was it something you were taking as far as, like, if I was Arnold, this is probably what would be going through my head, or what I would think it would sound like if I had lost my parents so long ago? I mean, what was that? How was that process as far as that goes?
As happened with the series, when I knew that we were going to do the movie,
Mm.
I did some kind of preliminary writing. And one of the things, obviously, one of the things I was thinking about was, what's a thematic idea that could possibly play when he finds his parents.
Mm.
Um, there were a few things. There was like, he's going to find his parents. They're the green-eyed people who need to have, some music. La Sombra, the bad guy,
Yeah.
needs to have a theme. So those are things. Those are all ideas that I played around with before I got any picture or anything. Before I actually started writing the movie, and the scene where Arnold finds his parents. There are really two ideas there. There's one is that great visual of the what would you call it? That big statue, and the big
Monolith.
horns that the steam comes out of. Those things. Obviously, those had to have a big musical sound. So that's that big kind of blah, the
Yeah.
big bass kind of brass, huge low, tubas and trombones thing that happens at the beginning of the cue. And then the other thing is that beautiful image of the butterflies
Yeah.
taking off. And that the image of the butterflies and one of the little melodic ideas, just like these two chords that I really liked for that moment really kind of turned into the same thing and became the engine that kind of took him all the way up to the room where his parents were.
Now, when you're working through all of this, is it so so I cook for a living. So there's been plenty of times where I sit here and think when I'm making something, do I like this because I like this, or do I like this because other people will like this because it tastes good, because it's got this, it's got enough salt, it's got enough acid, it's got enough sweetness, it's got everything it needs. Do you notice that about when you're doing your work? It's like, shit, man, I like this. And then do you like kind of crowdsource it? Like, hey, come over here, like your wife or your kids. If I show you this and then you listen to the sound, do you ever bounce ideas off of the people close to you to see if it's just something that you like or if it's something that collectively everybody's going to like?
Yeah, absolutely. I play things for my kids.
Mm,
I have two kids who are in their early 30s, so they're they know my writing really well. They know
yeah,
all the really bad stuff that I do, my bad habits and my good habits. My wife, I play stuff for more now than back in the day.
mhm,
But I think a really, to your point about is this just something for me or is this something that everybody's going to like? I think um, a big part of any creative endeavor, whether it's being a chef
mhm,
or whether it's being a musician or however you express yourself creatively, a huge part of it is coming to trust that uh, you have a voice, you have a thing that you do that has value,
yeah,
and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have value for everybody, but
mhm,
it has value for you that you get to realize in the making of it.
yeah.
And I think once you come to that magical point where you go, oh, I can do this. I can write music, or I can make a souffle. Whatever your particular hill happens to be that you're climbing, that's a great moment when the lights finally go on and you say, oh, okay, I can do this. My first wife used to get so mad at me because I would never say I was a composer. People would say, "What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I'm a keyboard player." She'd say, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you tell people that you're a composer?" I said, "Well, I didn't go to school for it. I'm completely self-taught. I, I just always, I don't know. It's just I didn't feel like I had the right
Did
to
you feel
say that."
pretentious to saying it?
What's that?
Did it feel pretentious saying it?
Yeah, a little bit, and I grew up in the Midwest, so if you're a Midwesterner, you at least back in the day, it was like, don't get too far ahead of yourself, young man.
You get
Who do you think you are calling yourself a composer?
it's funny you say that because there's humbling experiences both on the outside, on the inside. And my kid does point karate, so he does like a lot of tournaments and stuff like that, and he's got one coming up in a couple weeks, or next weekend actually. And last weekend he did his first, or not last week, I'm sorry, last year he did two, and those were his first two tournaments, and he placed first in both of them. And I was looking on the score breakdowns and all this other stuff because I was getting ready to sign him up for another one. And he's like, "Hey, why do they have my name listed? And then what does number 6 meaning?" I was like, "Oh, it means you're sixth in the state, but you've only had two fights, so they can only score what you've done while everybody else has done this many. You've only done this many, so you're bracketed higher." And he was like, "Oh man," he's like, "I'm sixth in the state." And I was like, "Calm down, Karate Kid. You're sixth in the state with two tourneys under your belt." And then he was like, "Yeah, but I'm still sixth in the state." And this is why I bring this up, is because you were talking about don't get ahead of yourself, young man. So he's got a cat that he wanted, and it's his job to scoop the litter box. So he went over into the kitchen again, and he was getting something. I heard him going, "Sixth in the state, sixth in the state," just cheering himself up, pumping himself up. So I look over and I'm folding laundry. I'm like, "Hey, sixth in the state," and he pulls his head over and he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Go up there and scoop the cat shit out of the litter box." Sixth in the state. And so he's like, all right, well, so you got to humble him, you got to break him down a little bit. So I completely understand what you mean about that Midwest vibe about staying humble and not getting your britches too high.
Yeah.
But so going back to you and Hey Arnold and just the amazing job you've done. So at this point, it's been almost close to what, 25 years that you've been working with this series. There's some pauses in between here and there with the show ending in 2000, was it 4, 5ish, and being brought back in 2017. And you brought up something earlier that I want to circle back to, and I wrote it down here in my notes. But you were talking about character and their character music, or especially Helga, right? So she'd either be super, super happy or super just demonic, and she's like, everybody's gonna die, everybody's gonna feel this wrath. What were some of your favorite characters to really find an essence for, and what were some of the ones that, I don't want to say least favorite, because that just seems like these characters suck, but it's not the point, it's not the case. What were some of the harder ones to find a voice or a sound for?
I don't remember really struggling with any of them, and I think what that is a credit to two things, really. First of all, the quality of the writing on the show was extraordinary. Um, I, I can't give you a complete list of other writers on the show, and I'll leave a ton of people out if I even start. But I will say, to a person, we had phenomenal writers on the show, and so what ended up getting recorded was awesome.
Yes.
The talent for the show, the casting for the show, was also routinely awesome. I mean, I think we had 6 kids play Arnold. 7, I think, if you count the Jungle movie. I believe that's right. All of whom brought particular strengths, but all of whom really brought their A game to the show. Franny, who played Helga, obviously irreplaceable.
Yes.
Jamil Smith, who played Gerald, irreplaceable. I mean, I think that the other characters, we had two boys play Stinky. 2 different boys play Stinky.
I think there was one for Harold, Justin Sherkovsky.
Justin Schenkro, yeah.
He played
also irreplaceable. Nobody's going to be able to do that. So you had that. So you got the writing, you got the incredible voice talent all the way through, and then you have the animators, and I got to give a shout out to Tuck Tucker, who was one of the lead animators on the show, who just passed recently. It's a real drag to lose Tuck. He was he was a monster. He was a monster artist, and who Helga turned out to be is in large part due to the fact that Tuck really took that character and made her into something. I mean, with all the other stuff that came before, but that's and so we got all these other great animators, and the artists who did the backgrounds for the show also were like so world class. So all of that stuff, all of that stuff goes into the mix to make the characters what they are. And all I'm doing is really paying attention to that stuff. When you work on a show where all the pieces are put together so well, the writing part, the thematic writing and all that stuff gets really easy. I loved Grandpa's theme, the kind of that thing. I loved Helga's love theme, and Arnold and Gerald both got this kind of New Jack. We used to call it the ring-a-ding, but it was So whenever it's like the sound that starts the end credit music, stomping. That thing just like at a certain point you go, hey, it's time for the ring-a-ding, and you just put up some version of that beat, and there you'd be.
I think you start selling shirts that say ring-a-ding, Jim.
What's that?
I said, I think you should start selling shirts that say ring-a-ding.
It's probably too late for that,
Nah,
unfortunately.
not at all, man. It's everything is coming back in vogue, man. What was once old is now new, and what's new is nobody gives a shit about anymore. Everybody wants what happened 20, 30 years ago. I mean, mind you, Hey Arnold coming back, right?
Right.
Um, so before we get past it, because whenever somebody that is past that comes up in a story, I've done it a few times with some of the, if you couldn't tell, I'm a huge Ninja Turtle fan behind me, and I've got them all over my arm. And one of my favorite people in the world, and I don't know if you know who he was, but James Avery, Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, was the voice of Shredder in the 1987 cartoon series. And I asked all of the guests that I've had on that got a chance to be in his presence, because he was such a, everybody called him a teddy bear. Everybody, just amazing stories. But you brought up Mr. Tucker. And I'd like to ask, if you want to, because I asked them as well with Mr. Avery and shit like that. Is there any story, and it doesn't have to be super personal, but any funny moment that you might have had with him that you like to share? If not, we don't have to talk about it. But I always like, whenever somebody that had such a huge influential part in a show or in somebody's life, and they tragically pass away, I always like to say thank you in a sense that, man, I wish I would have gotten the chance to thank him, just like I'm trying to do here now with you, to thank you as well as all the other animators and writers that have just worked on this show and made just not only my childhood, not only my child's childhood, man, but also my adulthood, and so many other kids out there and adults now at this point. But is there any story that you would like to share about Mr. Tucker?
Well, what I want to try and do is see if I can find. I don't know if I can do this because I'm such an Instagram idiot, but
It's okay, me too.
uh, Craig, Craig is the person to ask that question for
Mhm.
sure. And he posted up. I'm not going to be able to find this. He posted up a really great kind of a memorial to Tuck on his Instagram, just talking about how what a great guy he was, how hard he worked on the show, uh, and if I wasn't an Instagram idiot, I would read it to you, but I'm not going to be able to find it, unfortunately. But when you get Craig on the show, uh, ask him about Tuck
I will do. I've already
because
got it. I've got it.
because he'll have a Tuck Tucker story for you.
Yeah, I'm hoping that he'll come on down the line. He is a very, very busy man, as you know, being his friend. He's very busy and he's always getting pulled in different ways. But one day, I hope to have him on here. But nonetheless, man. So as we're starting to wind down, because I don't want to keep it too long, we've almost hit that hour mark. And I don't ever like taking you guys too long from your family, because you guys agree to come on here, and I really appreciate it every time I get to talk to somebody, like I said earlier, that had just such a huge part in my childhood. I like to say thank you, but I figure we can get to some questions, right? So we already asked AC's question, and some of these names I'm not going to read off because a lot of them are they'll make me blush, and I was a sailor, so uh, I don't know some of their names. Most of these came from Reddit and Facebook and Instagram, but nonetheless, here we go. So Miguel wants to know from Reddit, and well, no, this isn't even a question; it's just a statement. He wanted to tell you thank you, but he said, Miguel, he said the show wouldn't be what it was without the music, and you're already a big part of not only his life but his daughter's life. Excuse me, got a little choked up there. Big part of his daughter's life. So Miguel from Reddit, he wants to say thank you, Jim. I appreciate everything you did. Um, Gerald Waller from Facebook would love to know what inspired you to incorporate jazz into the music of the show. We touched a little bit on it, and we kind of talked about you and Craig going back and forth, but what was it about jazz that you specifically had to have in there?
Well, I think it was because it was sort of my uh, jazz and R&B were what I listened to when I was coming up, when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a great time for jazz recordings. I mean, it's just such a long list of incredible people who were recording and performing at that point. And so it was like going home for me. The idea that um, uh, that I could take some jazz ideas, and really I have to say I'm not a jazz musician. I don't know the 250 songs out of the American Songbook that every jazz musician has to know. I didn't sit around and shed my instrument so that I could go and hang with, guys that could play their asses off.
Yeah.
My keyboard skills are embarrassing.
Mhm.
But the feeling of that music and the sound of that music is something that really goes very deep in me, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's kind of the wellspring for me, from when I was a kid. So um, being able to reach into that bag of tricks and really explore. I had never done anything where I could use jazz harmony before, so I hadn't worked on any films where I got to try and see if I could act like McCoy Tyner for 30 seconds, so
Well, like I
so
said,
there I was.
the music really was the heart and soul behind this. I mean, there's not another show or another movie that I can really sit here and say, and I'm not into music the way you are, like most people are. Like, I enjoy music, but I do it as a way of escapism, right? So when I'm running, I love running after I've run. I hate running while I'm running, right? So, I'll go and run with my dog. And then I used to just listen to podcasts on runs. Um, Now I need something to like motivate me to get me through. It's like I need a lot of hate in my body to pedal my 225-pound ass up and down the street and up and down the hill. So music is, like I said, it's the inspiration. It's the what gets me going. And like I said, Arnold wouldn't be Arnold without the heart and soul that you threw into it. Um, but going into the next question, nope, that we already did that one. And Tim, one of my good friends, we play Dungeons and Dragons every Wednesday. So there's two of these guys in here. He wanted to know, what was your inspiration for the theme song to Hey Arnold?
Actually, it's a funny story that I've talked about in interviews before, but if you haven't heard it, um, back when I was in my 20s, I was in Boston in my kind of mid to late 20s, trying to get a record deal, be a songwriter. I was learning how to be in the studio. There was a studio called Music Designers in downtown Boston, which is where the Berklee College of Music is now. And so I was working at that studio, and one of the guys who was always around was this guy, Don Rosenberg, who was the son of the guy who started Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
And I thought, I should write a jingle for Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
And so I came up with this thing. I got the feeling like a donkey today, a Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin' Donut. and, and and I never recorded it, and I never played it for Donnie, and I never played it for his dad. It just kind of stayed in the back of my head, forever. So fast forward to 93 or whenever we're 94, whenever we're pitching the execs at Nickelodeon on some music ideas for the show, and Craig had always thought, he was always kind of finger popping and going, Arnold, you crazy nut, because it was like a Brat Pack thing, and there was Dino Spumoni
Yep.
in the show, so that was going to be one of the influences. This kind of 50s era swing was going to be a flavor, and so we thought, hey, that should be the theme song. So we're sitting in a meeting with the two executives, and we're starting to hum the song, and finger pop and sing, Arnold, you crazy nut. And before we even got like to the second line, they were already moaning. There was just like this low moan. So we knew he'd been shot down, and so I told Greg, I said, well, I'll take another crack at it. I'll come up with a different idea. So I went home, and then the idea that really sprang forth was the ring-a-ding. I turned on the ring-a-ding and got that going. And then that idea for it's kind of like, it's sort of like a bebop line, right? Yeah. It's a little bit out of tune, the intervals are not quite what you expect they're going to be. And so I just took that really kind of wholesome melody and busted it up a little bit and slammed it over that beat. And that's where it all started. That's where the theme song came from.
I told you, man, ring a ding is your next t-shirt, Jim. So.
So if you start listening to the theme song and all of a sudden you want to have a cruller, you'll know what the deal is, right?
Are you before I go to the next question, are you an SNL fan at all?
Saturday Night Live or no?
Yeah. Yeah, Saturday Night Live.
Oh, not for many years. I was a huge fan back in the day, but I haven't watched it for a long time.
So they did an episode with I think it was Casey Affleck a few years back, and I'll send it to you after this. But it was the Dunkin guy, and it's I got to go to Boston for the first time because that's where my wife's family is from. They're from Massachusetts area. So right before COVID kicked off and just shut everything down, I got to go up there and see the city. Cold as shit, coldest place I've ever been in my life, and I was in Great Lakes in February with snow up to my hip. I've never I've never been that cold in my life, essentially. Um, but just knowing that it was a guy named Donnie from the Dunkin' Donuts line, and then the character's name is Donnie in the skit, it's like everybody's knows Donnie, and I didn't realize that Dunkin' Donuts. It's essentially like Starbucks is everywhere else. There is a Dunkin' Donuts on every damn corner in Massachusetts. Like you turn around, there's a Dunkin'. You turn around here, there's a Dunkin'. It's insane. But like I said, I'll send you that clip. It is hilarious. So plowing ahead here for the next one. Greg, interesting name from Reddit wants to know: was there anything that didn't make the cut for the show? It's a two-part question, so we'll start with there. Was there anything that didn't make the cut for the show?
Musically, um, musically, no, really. I mean, that the funny story I was just telling you about the theme song,
Yeah.
we eventually wrote that song
Mhm.
and it became a promo that they used for there was a thing in Nickelodeon called the NickelO Zone.
Yeah.
And so we did a promo for the NickelO Zone and we wrote a whole lyric to that. Guy named Eric Allen, who was a promo guy for Nickelodeon, great guy, super talented, wrote a lyric for it, and we recorded it. Mervyn Warren from Take Six did a vocal arrangement, and we got a big band in, and we did, we spent a bunch of their money making a 30-second, great 30-second spot, which incidentally is on the Hey Arnold vinyl.
Yeah.
That just came out earlier this year. So if you can find a copy of the Hey Arnold vinyl, you can feast your ears on that.
I'm sure you can find on eBay for a pretty penny at this point.
Yeah.
So
but to answer the question, no, they were very. I was so blessed to be working with people who really just never said no.
that's always a good thing when they really trust you and they trust. So when I go and get a haircut, and this is going to sound like I'm diminishing your profession, and I really don't mean that that's the way it's going to sound. Please don't take this personal. When I go to a hair, it's very hard finding a barber that you trust, right? So I go there and they're like, "What do you want?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't work in this profession. I cook for a living. I don't cut hair. I don't know how to speak to barbers, right?" So the criteria is essentially, if you think I will look good in a mohawk, give me a mohawk. If you think I'll look good with a mullet, give me a mullet, right? I trust you 100%. Just two things. Please don't make me look dumb, and please don't let me regret giving you all of this trust. That's the only thing I ever say. I was like, please just do your best. Don't make me look stupid. Yes, it will grow back eventually. However, I don't want to be made fun of for a couple weeks. So please just do whatever you got to do. So it's always nice when you get that creative freedom in any line of work, really. But so I guess the second part of this question would be that if you really didn't get anything through, or if there was a couple things that didn't make the cut, would you be willing to release it? But everything you really wanted to say and put out there pretty much got done.
Yeah, there's a ton of music I would love to release. I think we definitely talked to Enjoy the Ride, which is the label that released the Hey Arnold vinyl, about doing a volume 2. So hopefully that's somewhere in the future. And then at some point, I'm hoping to do a digital release of a lot of the material. I just have to make the deal with Viacom to get the rights to do it. but that's not going to happen until we've really kind of run the course of the vinyl releases, so that those guys can, you know, make their money back on that.
Yeah. Is there any way that you could get the rights back? Or let me put it this way. Is there a way that us fans could help you in a sense that crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, you know, GoFundMe, or I can't think of the other one. But you could essentially throw like, hey man, we want to do this. And I see it all the time with people, like when they write books, they write music, or they write something, or something has the rights somewhere else. And I don't want to say they're not doing anything with it, but you see an avenue that you could take it. And it is your work at the end of the day, even though it was licensed out, you were paid to do it, they own it. But is there a way that us fans could possibly help as far as crowdsourcing, GoFundMe, or anything like that to help with the rights?
Interesting. I never thought about it that way. It's an interesting idea. Most of the time, the producers are not interested in giving up any of their intellectual property.
Yeah.
Certainly not for, you know, not for a song. On the other hand, they're usually not terribly active about promoting
Mm-hmm.
the music from their shows. And Hey Arnold is kind of an outlier. You know, fortunately for us all, the music became more of a thing than any of us had any idea it was going to be. And I think probably is more of a thing than Viacom really is aware that it is. When I remember when we approached them about doing the vinyl release, the you know, kind of volume 1 of the Hey Arnold music, they were kind of stoked. They were kind of happy to get the phone call, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you know, it's not an initiative that the company is going to take. They're really not geared up to do, you know, KTEL versions of their scores, which is a shame because it's a, you know, it's a revenue source for them.
There's a market for it. I promise you that. I mean, like I said, the reason, and I don't want to say the only reason that this show is so iconic was because of the music. Like when I gave you my bullshit math earlier, is like 50% of 100% of the reason this show is so good, which absolutely makes no sense in the world. But nonetheless, it makes sense up here, and that's all I'm really shooting for. But you guys were a very big reason. By you guys, I mean you and the people you worked with and worked, you know, that helped you do what you had to do. You guys are the reason that people love this music and this soundtrack. And you would just think that, man, this is an opportunity to have more cash revenue, you know, more cash flow coming in, or more anything. Everybody's really looking towards, you know, bringing stuff back from the past. I mean, Arnold did it, Rocko's Modern Life did it, and Invader Zim. All three of those shows partnered with Netflix, which partnered with Viacom and Nickelodeon. You would think like, hey man, let's strike while the iron is hot, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, I was kind of bummed when that didn't happen.
We've had high hopes for years that Netflix or Apple or somebody would pick up and try and give us a 6th season to do, you know. And Craig's been, you know, he's pitched it to everybody that's out there, and at the end of the day, nobody wants to do it.
I don't understand, and I'm, like I said, I am just a fan, so I'm super biased when it comes to these characters and the world that Craig has created, and you have just composed the entire world that I want to live in. I want Jim Lang to follow me, and anytime I open a door, I don't know if you ever watched Family Guy, but Peter he got rich and he hired a band to follow him. So anytime he did something, he had like a full orchestra behind him. He kicked somebody in the nuts, and it was that dun 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 for the tuba and shit like that, right? So I would love to have somebody like Jim Lang saying, hey man, we would love to do, you know, one more season. Or Craig, I just don't understand this guy. Like I said, is a genius for one. And two, you would think with as much money as he made him with Arnold, and your Jingle and everything else you guys have done, they've like, you know what, let's just write this guy. Let's just sign a check. He can fill in the numbers later. I mean, if I was a businessman wearing a suit, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be going and finding the people that made my company what it is. And then just like, come on, let's keep getting these ideas out there. But just doesn't make any sense, I suppose. So,
well, we still hope that it'll happen someday, but maybe it will and maybe it won't. You never know.
Like I said, I hope it does, man. So we got 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up and then we'll go from there, right? So Jessica Ness from Facebook would love to know. Well, we just answered that question. I should have looked ahead, man, because they wanted to know if you were to get another season, would you be interested in coming back as the composer?
Oh, hell yeah.
Jessica Ness, that was a hell yeah from Jim Lang. And the last one from my other D&D buddy, Garrett Peace. How do you feel about the series ending with the Jungle movie? And then it's another question about what we were just asked, if you'd be willing to do spin-offs. Not so much a final season, but would you be interested in a spin-off? And what character would you love to see get spun off?
Uh, yeah, more would be great. The ending of the movie, we talked a lot about, are we going to leave it, are we going to leave the door open just a crack
Yeah.
at the end? And actually there was a moment, I can't, it's funny, I haven't looked at the movie for at least a year now, but there's a moment at the very end where Arnold's walking into the school and his parents have followed him right up to the door, and so we had a lot of conversation about, if we go forward, Arnold's going to be living in a very different world. His parents are here now.
Mhm.
And not only are his parents here, but his parents have been asleep in the jungle for years.
Yeah.
So they're going to be a liability. It's not like he got his parents back. He's got this other kind of crazy couple to go with his crazy grandparents. So his life is going to get even more complicated. I mean, those are the kinds of discussions we have. And there's a moment right where he turns and looks back through the door of the school and sees his parents outside, hopefully standing on the steps out there, where we put there's kind of a little signature sound, like a little woodwind thing that we used elsewhere in the show, when it was like, oh, what's that kind of musical statement. We put that in there, and then I think we got notes from the executives like, no, that's weird. That beat is really weird. You should just take it out. So it ended up not being in the musical cue at the end. But people should know, we definitely had conversations about, okay, one thing we might do is to just start next day.
Yeah.
Arnold's weird parents are here. What's that going to be like? They want to follow him around everywhere. What's that feel like?
It's and I don't know if I'm looking too far into this, but it is a very beautiful moment when that movie ends and his parents are walking him, right? Because his parents, like I'm sure you did with your kids, and I did with my son, and then my son, soon son to be, when he goes to school. You walk your kids to school for the first day. You're taking them all the way up to the place where you can, and then, not so much for me, but my wife had such a huge issue, not an issue with it. She had a hard time, letting go, essentially saying, here's my son. Right. So it was a beautiful moment, and I got goosebumps just thinking about it. And like I said, I don't know if I overanalyze this stuff, because at the end of the day, it's a cartoon, and I don't want to diminish anybody that's working, but it's a cartoon. It's not real. Right. But you can take the real out of a cartoon, and it's real to you. So when I saw that, I was like, they never got to take him to his first day of school. So this is them, however many years it was, 10, 11 years, whatever it was. I can't remember the exact age. But this is their first day at school with their son, right? So they're going through the same emotions. Like, what do I do now? Like, I was bummed when I got back to my car, because I didn't want to see anybody cry. I was in uniform. I didn't want to, like, this guy's soft. I'm like 24 at the time. So I had this, weird preconceived notion, like, you got to be strong for your kid. You can't really cry for the kid. You don't want to make him stressed out. So, I lost it when I got back to the car, because my little buddies in school, I don't really have, I don't have anybody to, like, come and bounce ideas off of anymore. Just listen to me vent when I'm upset, So it was definitely weird. But seeing that, you're like, it transports you back to a time. You're like, oh man, I know what that felt like. I know what they were going through. And the fact that they've been asleep. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Encino Man with Pauly Shore, but the caveman's frozen, or the caveman's frozen. He comes back, a million years, whatever it is. And he's just dropped in downtown Encino in the 90s. And then you're like, what the hell happens to a caveman that's never seen any of this stuff? And that's the feel I got. They're like, what would they do? And I would love to see, what the first day of school was like for them. Like, what were they doing? Like, just, wow, kids are on their phones now. I mean, we go away, it's beepers, or, phones that look like bricks. And now it's something that could be folded up or, slid right in your pocket. I would love to see, like, Holy shit, everything's magic now, right? So, pretty good question from Garrett, even though I messed with him a little bit, was breaking his balls. But nonetheless, man, I've kept you long enough. And Jim, I really appreciate you sitting down with me. Like I said at the beginning, and I've said numerous times here already, you know, your music was so influential for this series, for these movies. You know, you said it earlier, when you hear something, you know, you're transported back to a time where you can understand, like, wow, I was really influenced by this. And there was no place I wanted to be than right at PS 118 with these kids, hanging out with them, learning from them, understanding what they were doing, not only just for that, for the stories and for the friendships they had, but for the cool ass music that they got to live with and inspire their life, man. I can't thank you enough for not only taking the time to sit down with me today, but doing what you did and making my childhood and so many other kids' childhoods so damn fun. So, Jim, right off the bat, man, thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Julian. It's really, uh, I'm very blessed to have fallen into that, to met Craig, and had a chance to work on that show. And it's, not everybody gets that lucky in their career. So I'm thankful for it every day of my life, and thankful for all the great email I get from people talking about how much they like the music to the show. It means a ton to me.
Well, like I said, man, I'm so glad we got to talk, and I'm so glad that they always say never meet your heroes. But I'm telling you right now, boys and girls, go out and meet your heroes. They're always great, man. He's been Jim. I've been Julian. This has been What's in My Head podcast, and we're out of time, man. Have a great day. Say something nice to somebody today, and I'll catch you when I catch you.